Hello, and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love podcast, bringing you expert teachers to help you feel that mind, body, and spirit connection, both with yourself and with your true love. I'm your host, Coach Valerie Green from CoachValerieGreen.com. And in this episode, I'm really excited to interview Dr. Elsbeth Meuth and her husband and business partner, Freddy Zental Weaver. Hi, it's so wonderful to have you on the show.
Great to be here with you, Valerie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and they're going to have a really, we're going to have a really lovely conversation because I have listened and watched their other materials, and they are incredible teachers about how to ignite passion and lasting fulfillment in your life and relationships through a lot of integrated modalities. And it's really what they'll be doing on this interview is to be introducing leading edge principles and inspiring practices on how to access this innate creative energy inside of us, listen to the wisdom of our heart, connect to the power of the mind, which is my definition of soul shaking love, that we're really igniting all aspects of ourself, mind, body, heart, spirit, and connecting with our partner, first with ourselves from that place and with our partner from that place to have that soul shaking love connection. That's how I put it, of course, in my podcast. I love the ways that they explain how to create that mind, body, spirit connection with yourself and with your partner. So that's what we'll be talking about. So I'm super excited. And I'll tell you a little bit about them first. So, Elsbeth and Freddy are business partners and husband and wife, and they live in Chicago. They have helped thousands of couples and singles to create lasting intimacy and fulfillment. And they've been featured on Showtime's documentary series, Sexual Healing, as well as the Emmy Award-winning NBC show Starting Over. And they're the best-selling authors of Sexual Enlightenment, and they're endorsed by Dr. Michael Beckwith, who I also love. And co-founders of Tantra Nova Institute in Chicago. And so Tantra, or Tantra, as it's sometimes pronounced, is very misunderstood in our culture. And I was just talking to them about this before the show, because it's actually about learning how to use our innate life force energy, both to access that mind, body, spirit connection within ourselves and to connect with each other from our hearts, and actually listen more deeply to ourselves and others. And so I'm so excited. First of all, I can ask them if I've done a good job in explaining that and introducing them, or if they want to add, but then I'm just really excited to have them share our wisdom with us. So without further ado.
Hey, good to be here, Valerie. Thank you. Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you so much for having us on your platform. As you said, we're partners and beloveds for 22 years. We've had our institute here in Chicago, teaching people practices of how to get out of the stuck place often that they find themselves in, to move with grace, ease, and flow towards that dream that they have about what they want to create in their life. Tantra has many variations. We're Tantra Nova, Tantra New, so we're integrating aspects of old Tantra and new approaches from the West around transformation and how we can shift what we're getting to move towards what we most deeply desire. And working with sexual energy is unique and different. It's old and it's new, and we want to get into that with you. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And I really am moved to ask you first, how did you come to share these teachings? First of all, you can say the most poignant aspects of your teachings anytime you want, of course, but how did you come to share those teachings with each other first?
Do you want to start with your story?
I can if you want. I just got through talking. Okay, yeah. So our curriculum, the core of our curriculum, I was first introduced to when I was 13 years old living in Hawaii, though subsequently when Elsbeth and I met, she'd gone through a 2-year program to teach this in Maui, so I went through the same program, which helped to solidify what I had read and learned through all my other years of experience. But so I first was introduced, I was living in Hawaii, 13 years old, going through my puberty, spending a lot of time in the shower, as a lot of guys are at that age, fascinated by the sexual energy. And my father, who at the time was a practicing psychiatrist, I was very fortunate to have somehow created him in my life as my father. And he took pity on me. I thought I was going to hurt myself in there. Gave me a book to read on how to integrate meditation and sex practices. Oh, wow.
Oh my God. You're so fortunate.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have had him as a mentor and partner and friend and father. My girlfriend loved it. I loved it. And more than that, I had this dream. I was going into high school to go on to college on athletic scholarship, but living in Hawaii, didn't believe that I could get the training and experience and da-da-da-da. Well, I did go on to college on athletic scholarship, and in no small part due to the practices of sexual meditation that allowed me to get out of the belief that I couldn't something, right?
Yeah.
After college, I kept doing these practices and reading books and applying these principles in my personal relationships. I was in the software business for a long time in San Francisco. And initially, it was a fun industry. It was great. It was new. It was exciting. San Francisco, I loved it. And then after about 15 years, it was just a job. Looking for a reinvigoration of my life and my engagement in my life, knowing what I knew about this work in my life. There was an opportunity in Chicago. They hired me, moved me here. That was 22 years ago. I was single online looking for Shakti, a female Tantric partner, and Elsbeth showed up, and I'd really come here to meet her. And while we pooled our resources, in 6 months to the day we met, we created Tantra Nova. And thusly, as I say, 22 years later, we've worked with thousands of couples all over the world and singles. We've been on faculty at some of the top transformational institutes in the world, and we love doing this work. It's been the greatest gift in my life in terms of my contribution in the world and what I love to do. And Elsbeth will tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of
Yes,
this
exactly.
work. Yeah.
First, I want to highlight something that you shared in your story, which I think is really useful, because I think a lot of people are used to only hearing about sexual energy as something that we're meant to release or experience pleasure or procreation with, which are, of course, legitimate means. What you're saying is that through the practices you learned in this book, that you were able to channel your life force energy in order to access your creative energy so that you can challenge your limiting beliefs about what was possible. And so that's a big part of what you teach. So I just want to
Yes, absolutely. That's a big part. We'll get into that too, because that's an opening for all of us to keep listening for.
Right. Because I don't think that we're really, as a culture, used to having an awareness that that's possible. So, we can talk about that.
That's right. Become resigned.
That's so great that you highlighted this, because how can we use this wonderful life-giving energy to assist us in transforming?
Right, exactly. Transforming what doesn't serve us so that we can more fully give our gifts to the world and experience not just pleasure, but our pure creative energy, which is, as you share, what Tantra is really about. So anyway, sorry, Elsbeth, I want you to share your story as well. I'm not meaning to cut you off.
No, this is all moving in the right direction.
It's wonderfully flowing.
It's flowing beautifully. Thanks, Val.
So I wish I would have had a dad when I was 13 years old who would have given me a book on sex consciousness.
Right.
Far from it. Don't know about you, Valerie, but that was not customary in my family.
And not most other people's. That's why I was like, oh, wow, you're so fortunate. So, I want to highlight that.
Yeah, I picked a really enlightened guy.
Very unusual. So anyway, as you can tell from my accent, I didn't grow up in the United States. I was born and raised in Germany. I'm one of 10 children, had a very strict dad. And, that was difficult at times, because particularly when I hit puberty and started to express myself, it was very much to the chagrin of my parents. I did it anyway, but there was quite a bit of suffering, caused through that on both sides, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. And with a lot of us have that history. As I shared when we were first talking, I'm lucky to not have been shamed around my sexuality. I was empowered in a healthy way. I think my wounding is more emotional, which is why that's what I teach. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what you're sharing is more normal.
Yeah. So, and I came to the United States in my late 20s to do postgraduate work in music, and then stayed on, got my doctorate in education a few years later, and then moved on to do management consulting. So that was in the 90s, and I had grown to become successful in the consulting arena. However, I was quite disappointed and had difficulties in the intimate relationship realm. I had this pattern of attracting unavailable men, and while that was often very exciting, most of the time I was alone.
Right.
There was something, I knew there was something in the way. I, of course, held it like, if he only was available, I would be happy. And, if he came to me, totally missing at that point that I may not have been available. But that is what I actually discovered then by delving deeply into studying Tantra as a discipline and not just, reading a book here and there. Because in my despair, I knew I needed to find something. I wanted to see what was in front of my eyes that I couldn't see that actually brought me the same over and over again. And also, look, that all opened up for me, that my despair really, hit me when I hit 50. And I knew if I was not going to change the trajectory, it was clear I want to end up without lasting intimacy and love in my life before I would leave this planet. I did not want to settle for that. So in my tantric practice, in my tantric healing, I went to workshops, and it was so powerful. What I discovered was that I had held distrust towards men. And it, harkened back to a time when I was 18 years old, first boyfriend. We just had spent lovely, blissful couple of years together. And then he asked me to have intercourse. And I said yes, although I was not really ready. And it was so freakingly painful. I mean, Valerie, I had to go to the gynecologist. The bill went to my house. My dad opened it. All hell broke loose. He called me a whore.
Wow.
The boyfriend left the relationship a few weeks later, and there I was all by myself, no one to turn to. And in my despaired moment, I made this decision, which often we make to cope
Right.
the situation. Something like, see, Elsbeth, men are not there for you when you need them.
Yeah.
And while that was so at that time, it trailed me into my young adulthood, into my adulthood, and it was like in the background without me knowing. No wonder that I attracted unavailability, given that was then a further proof that, see, Elsbeth, these men are not there for you when you need them.
Right.
So
That's the limiting belief, self-fulfilling prophecy loop. Yep.
Right, exactly. So all of that was uncovered. There's a very particular healing ritual that is dedicated to the woman, where the woman is the receiver. And it opened up there when I was touched on the cellular level, because I had done therapy around this in my 30s, and that was very helpful. There was someone who listened to me, who took me seriously, and I could speak, and so I thought it was complete. Little did I know that there was some memory in me that could not be accessed through the conscious mind. So I could talk about it, But when I was brought back into the experience by being touched in a certain way, that brought the memory up, and it was all, in an altered state, that allowed the release of that what had gotten stuck there for so long. And then in the releasing, it was like opening a valve where the steam gets a little bit more intense first.
Yes.
And then it fizzles out. So the pain, the physical, the emotional pain, really came up, and then that could be released.
Wow.
And in place of it, what opened up was deeper trust. First and foremost, deeper trust in myself, because that usually goes first. Elsbeth, why didn't you say no? Or why didn't you speak up that you were not ready? So I couldn't even count on myself, like losing trust with myself. So trust in myself, deeper trust in men in general opened up. And then 6 months later, Freddy Zental came into my life.
Ta-da!
Yes. When the lover is ready, the lover appears.
Right.
And I believe that I would not have recognized him as a potential partner. I mean, yes, handsome guy, interesting, tall, everything. But a potential partner, if I hadn't done that clearing work, because he was available.
Right.
And if I had still been in that unavailable pattern, it wouldn't have clicked, So I'm very grateful. And ever since, my sweetheart.
Yeah. We transcended the romantic drama. We didn't have children. We do have property and business together, but we created Tantra Nova. And this is our contribution. This is our thing that's bigger than us, the romance.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I love that you shared that. I mean, it's a perfect segue to, I know what you want to share about sexual energy actually being creative energy. That, yes, we can use that to create a family if that's what we want. And many people want that. I think that's wonderful. My husband and I are choosing a similar mission to yours. We're not creating a business together, but he and I are both entrepreneurs, and he's a manager. But I teach, and this is, I'm sure, what you teach, that sexual energy is creative energy. And if two people are life partners who celebrate their all-encompassing connection through a sexual connection as well, that is creative energy and can be used to create your purpose. What is your purpose as a couple? What are you here to create in the world that is better together than you can do on your own? And I know that that's what both of you also teach.
Well, that's what we did. I don't know. A lot of folks come for a lot of reasons, and the work, as you know, can be used for multiple reasons for what it is and what you want to bring into your life. It's really remembering that, these practices bring us back to what we've forgotten. It's remembering what we've forgotten, because when we start out in the womb, it's womb service, and we're just floating in the embryonic fluid, and it's just wonderful. And then we're born and we're, bright lights and whacked in the bottom, and some guys are getting their wee-wees cut and we're thinking, send me back, and our brains develop and our ego develops and our awareness. And then we have these experiences in life, and we make decisions like Elsbeth shared with, when she was a young woman, and men aren't to be trusted. And we remember these patterns, neurosynaptically, and it's not even a conscious thing anymore. Yet the thing that connects us to this elegant design of a universe that goes on forever, which is hard for me to even imagine, is our imagination.
Yep.
Our capacity to dream about something that's never been before. And these are the practices to return us to what I call kind of a zero balance, a curious witness of this clay that we are, that's been formed from all these experiences, to move into this infinite possibility of what we're dreaming to create. So this is a flattening process. And the sexual energy leads us to that, because when we're in it, we're open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed, more endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, the feel-good hormones. So we're emotionally shifted, chemically shifted. And then with the distinctions that we share in terms of breath awareness, energy awareness, and intention, we get more unmasked to what we don't see running in the background, the subconscious, which is 70% of things going on. Right. So from that place, we can start to tune into a new energetic listening to some of those old stories, a new frequency in terms of the pleasure and the joy of what we're creating, and so on.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it. And as Elsbeth shared, and I know you have a version of that Einstein quote in your ebook on your website, that the problem can't be solved with the same level of awareness that created it. That if we're in our head and we're trying to challenge our limiting beliefs, that can only go so far, right? You thought you solved it that way, but then you got into your body. And I love the way Gabor Mate says, our body remembers everything. There's many teachers that say that, but we don't recall it with our minds unless we get back in our body in a safe space. And what most people wind up doing is they get in their body and it's not a safe space, and then they don't know what to do with it, and then we get further wounding and shutdown and denial and repression that way. And so what you offer is creating a safe space so that we can heal and grow and create and explore and co-create, as you're saying. And so let's talk about those practices. First of all, what does tantric intimacy have to do with feeling fulfilled in life and love? And then what are the basics of, well, if sexual energy isn't just for procreation and pleasure, what does it mean to use it for healing and growth and creativity?
Yes. Oh, thanks for the question. So the sexual energy is life force energy. They are the same. They are not two different things. The other thing I also want to say around the sexual, because often in our culture, when we hear sexual, we immediately go to the sex act. Mm-hmm. Like that, as if that was the only way how to express it. No, the sex act is one form of expressing it. So then let's really, connect with that sexual energy that is life force, that is running through us at all times. In the bedroom, outside of the bedroom, in this conversation, there's energy running through you, Valerie, through Freddy, through me. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be alive. And that energy shows up at different gradations. Right now, it's probably more subtle for most of us, even the listeners. However, when I work out at Lake Michigan, I can feel the breeze on the skin of my hand, and it may feel very, very lovely, very pleasant, pleasurable. I'm not highly aroused yet. I'm a little bit more, the energy has risen a little bit more than when I'm just sitting and listening. So then, of course, it can go up all the way to this climax for the woman or the ejaculation for the man, highly aroused. It's the same energy, just at different gradations. Then in a tantric practice, we can learn to play this energy like a flute, where I can play on different levels and really move up and down. It's not about, to come to completion, because there's something about in completion where the energy then may also go down, particularly for the men, where there's a lot of loss of life force energy through an ejaculation. For us women, we don't have that same refractory. However, to just ride the wave can be just so enriching in many ways for my physical health, connecting with my love being, connecting with my consciousness self. And so what I love about the tantric practice is that it guides me. And it never stops, like the more I practice, the more I learn about myself, the more I explore, the wiser I get, is that this energy is so life-giving and so inspiring, and just so enlivening and the wish to feel alive. For me, it's an expression of fullest aliveness, and that has grown for me over the years. I'm 74 years old now.
Wow, you certainly are very vibrant. I would not have guessed that.
Sexual energy.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm 45. Most people don't guess that about me either. But
I'm 67, so we're all...
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's, I mean, not to cut you off, but I do agree that if what you're saying is beautiful, and if we actually, what you're talking about is using somatic body-centered practices to cultivate sexual energy, not just keep it in our sex centers, but spread it throughout the body and use that to clear away old patterns from our heart so we could be more emotionally available, and from our limiting beliefs so we could be more focusing on what we're moving towards, as Freddy said. So if, and I know that there's many different practices that you teach to do that, we can talk about some simple ones that listeners can take on the call. I just think it's important to highlight that is what you're sharing, and that if you're so beautifully describing that if you're able to not just be in your head about, oh, okay, I'm stuck, but I don't know how to get out of it. What do I do? And learn how to cultivate the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the heart, the wisdom of your higher self when you're in that mindfulness space that Freddy mentioned in the beginning, where you can, I forget the words you use, but they were wonderful, that observer of the clay that we are all molded by our history, and that through observing and using these practices, we can remold the clay so that, or depending on what it is, your spiritual practices, you can let your higher self, as Michelangelo said, that, how'd you make the David? Well, the David was already in the stone, right? Like I just removed everything that wasn't him, right? So that's what this life force energy can do, is remove everything that's not us, I think what you're talking about. And your journey, Elizabeth, sorry, I know it sounds like Elizabeth, but it's spelled Elsbeth, that your journey seems like you did bump up against that old programming a lot, but that what I want to highlight is what you're talking about is that in the trainings that you did, in the workshops that you did, you were held. And that's what you and Freddy do for other people, is you hold them in a safe space to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, these old beliefs are coming up. These old painful places in my body are coming up. What do I do with that? How do I release it? And that's what you're both talking about. Once you release it, then you can actually cultivate it and use it, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Thank you. Then also through the release, the clearing, what opens up is actually greater sensibility to become aware of life, of the world, further of myself, of course, ongoingly, and then also of others. You just ignited something in me when you said this, which is by clearing, by having come up against borders and restrictions, and yet being a free spirit at the same time, but then suffering under these restrictions deeply. And also that really trained me to ready myself to, share a message that is a little bit out of the box. I mean, it's not your corporate job or even not a teacher in school. And the other part of that is really out of that clearing, and it's, shifting the nervous system, that sensibilities could open up further within me, that allows me now to listen, not only with my ears, but with my body, with my energetic self. So I can, support, and you probably know this from your own work, can move like a laser beam, not like pushing in there. I don't mean that, but like clarity or seeing something, so I can be of greater service to others. And the older or more mature I get, the greater my ambition to assist with great velocity.
Yes.
I'm where we cannot push any, each person has their own pace, rhythm. However, when someone is ready, when someone is open, then having the right guy at that moment that can just move along. And of course, velocity then has to do with my insights, with my readiness as a teacher. So that all got ignited by what you said about through the clearing, new views, new insights, and new capacities for action arise.
Right. Yeah. As you said, that when you did that work, that you were more emotionally available to yourself. And that's what allowed you to then be available to someone else.
Yes.
And I think that speaks really well towards my next question, which is that, and you share it so beautifully on the interview on your website too, that a lot of us are used to knowing what it feels like to fall in love, but we don't know how that happened because it just happens. And then when the honeymoon phase wears off, those feelings can fade. And we're not really taught how to create love. And so what do you mean by creating intimacy and love?
Yeah, it's like remembering again what we've forgotten, because we become resigned, particularly in relationship, that, it'll never be this way because she doesn't or he doesn't this, and it's always going to be this way. Of course, that's an external reference as opposed to sourcing and owning our experience. So it's remembering this possibility. So it's first working with the processes to flatten the story that we live in. I think the line that I used earlier was the curious witness of the clay that we look into the world from, right?
Yes.
And that's all the experiences that we've accumulated that we have used to formulate how we make sense of it all. And yet we have this vision of I'd like to this or like to that, feel this, I'd like to love this person, yet I feel like, whatever. So the practices begin to give us a little distance and allow us to remember through just the somatic experience of what sexual energy does for us. It's creative, it's joyful, again, chemically we're changed, emotionally more enlivened, and it's in that place that we are reminded in the body, and then with our awareness, with intention, wanting to create a specific thing, we can start to get some space to start bringing it in. And this stuff is moment by moment. It's never like, I'm enlightened now. I don't have to do any more meditation. All done, So it's like stuff doesn't stop happening between us. It just doesn't stick around as long.
Right. Exactly. We can move through it because emotions are energy in motion, and you know how to work with, all of the energies to then channel them towards what you want, right? And I know we're talking a little esoterically, so of course we can bring in specific examples.
To create, your question was, how do you create love? How do you regenerate the love that we feel initially when we first meet? Oh God, I love the way you smell, your underarms and your toe jams. I love it. After about 3 years, you're like, you need to take a bath now.
Yes,
we start to lose some of that, infatuation. So how do we regenerate what we want to create and how we want to feel? And this is all part of the practice.
Totally. Right. That's how you.
But you're right. Some people listen and go, that sounds kind of woo-woo, Freddy. But what's really woo-woo are single-celled amoebas, multi-celled organisms, and a universe that goes on for ad infinitum. And that's our lineage. We're just beginning to tap into what we are part of.
Exactly. That's how we actually, you teach specific tools and practices to create that feeling of love, which is already within us, of course, but as we're talking about removing what isn't it, so that we can share that with our partner.
And the thing that's wonderful about working with sexual energy as a transformational tool is it leads you right there.
Let's talk a little bit more about come back again to the sexual energy in a moment, because sexual energy is an integral part of it. The thing is, with love and intimacy, we come so much from these are feelings. Mm-hmm. However, love is actually a practice. I call it an psychosocial action. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's based in feelings. I'm not saying that they are not feelings. However, unless it is expressed to myself or to another, it's not be lived in community, and our relationships are all about community, like a one-on-one community or a larger community. And so then what are the principles and practices that we may identify that actually could lead us back in the moment of challenge, in the moment of not being heard, or not understanding another, or not feeling that my partner listens to me, what's so important for me in the bedroom. You know, then I shut off or make him wrong, or vice versa. It can go both ways. Or I never get what I want, be it in the sexual intimate realm or in life, in relationship itself. And so what are the principles and practices? And, you know, we couldn't drive a car without knowing the principles of a gas pedal and a brake. If I don't know these distinctions, I cannot drive a car. Because if
or the accelerator, if it's an electric car.
Would be fatal.
No, exactly. And so that's a great question. What are the principles and practices?
Yes. And so where we start out, no matter who comes, is being introduced to these foundational principles and practices. And one key foundational principle and practice is the breath, the conscious breath. Because while we are used to breathing, we are built like that so that we don't suffocate. It's built into our lungs. If there's not enough oxygen, we gasp for air. It's not that I said, okay, Elsbeth, it's time for gasping for air. No, it's a reflex, you know. However, there is another kind of breath, which, so that gasping for air lives on the sympathetic nervous system level. We teach the parasympathetic nervous system breath, and we can do a little practice in a moment if you like, so people really can get a sense, first-hand experience, where we breathe into the belly, because the belly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system is the nervous system that regulates all the involuntary functions, like the heartbeat, the digestion, the blood flow. And it's also the nervous system that makes us calmer, relaxed. So when I'm in the heat of my anger, where I, of course, am totally right and Freddy is totally wrong, you know, and I have to make sure he gets it, there is no listening on my side. There is no being relaxed or open or what do you think, darling? No, this is how it is.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that's how it is for everyone when we're, you know, quote unquote,
on it.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're on it. Right. Like there's many sayings in the transformation world. We're not present. We're not listening. Yes. And conflict is only resolved through deeper listening to our own feelings and needs and the other person's feelings and needs. And so what you're saying is you have to get into your parasympathetic, because if we're in fight or flight, there's no listening from that place.
Right. And it's so when I'm angry, you know, the last thing I want is connect intimately with Freddy.
Yeah.
How, and I know where I need to start is to connect intimately with myself. I cannot connect intimately with him if I'm not connected intimately with myself. And the only way to connect intimately with myself is actually coming into that calm place. And what we have found is that the belly breath, the parasympathetic breath, is such an easy way, because to will myself out of anger is rather difficult.
Oh, yes.
You know? So
everybody probably knows that, like, stop being angry. I mean, that's because all my problems in the first place was repression. Yeah. So that doesn't work.
So now it needs the parasympathetic breath has to be practiced. It doesn't come naturally or easily. However, once it's practiced, which means the nervous system is used to it, once the nervous system is used to anything, it does it automatically, just pushing the gas pedal when it's time to do it, or the brake, you know. we don't think about it anymore.
Right. It's the muscle memory.
Right, exactly. And so that is, so the first principle is the sympathetic, parasympathetic breathing, the belly breath. The second principle is to drop then into that witness state. And do you want to share?
Yeah, sure. So the breath and the breathing, parasympathetic breathing, one, again, more oxygenation, more endorphins, more chemical shifts. And what more importantly than that even is that it gives us, we have to think consciously to physically do that, to bring the breath down and extend the diaphragm behind the belly. We have to think to do that versus the sympathetic breathing. And that thinking to do that gives us a nanosecond, a moment of pause from this traffic or this rain or how could he or she say that, right? Yeah. And that pause, if we have been practiced, is enough for us to go, I'm getting a little distance from this charge, and now I can flatten that charge with further breath and further witnessing of it, and because the total felt sense of it, right? We have the thought, the story, then with the total felt sense with the anger and the upset and the heart rate and blah, blah, blah. Yep. Now, getting a little distance, we can start to move towards what it is I want to create: loving peace, relaxation, communication, whatever it is, And so that's the first piece, the breathing, yes. And then the witness state of mind, and then the awareness of how energy is showing up in the body. Mm-hmm. And that kind of deeper listening is something that is available, just it has to be cultivated.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And that's something, Valerie, as you know, we don't get taught when we grow up. We don't learn about our human energy. However, human energy, that is life force energy. Life force energy is present in human beings, in animals, and in plants. We don't learn about it. I mean, I learned about electrical energy, thermal energy, nuclear energy in school. I never learned in biology about my own energy. However, it's the most powerful energy there is, given that it brings forth life. I mean, nuclear energy is very powerful too, but it cannot bring forth life.
Right.
So then we want to become aware of how this life force energy shows up in us. Mm. Because again, if I don't know a break, I cannot use it. Yep. If I don't know about my energy, I cannot interact with it. Now, life force energy is given to us at the moment of conception. We don't generate it ourselves. And then it leaves us when we leave this planet. So while we don't generate it, we can activate it and guide it, So, and it can be guided through the breath, because breath and energy go together. When we don't breathe, we die. It's rather obvious.
Right.
So if they go together in dying, they must go together in being alive. And the Tantric practice really puts this to use. And so we learn how to listen the different ways how energy shows up within ourselves. And then we can, through the breath, start moving, guiding, channeling the energy. So, for example, how the energy shows up is, in my physical body, it shows up as a sensation. I feel hot, I feel cold. Those are sensations which are frequencies. They are associated with a physiological function. Capillaries open when I feel hot. They get constricted when I feel cold. I have a knot in my stomach. There's a muscular constriction or inflammation of an organ or whatever it may be. There is a particular sensation we feel. We want to bring awareness to what sensations we may feel in the body. For some people, initially, it's very difficult.
Oh, yes. As you said, we haven't been taught.
No, it's in the head, but the opening to the body is the access to what goes on internally. Instead of living at the surface and pretending, all is fine, or I'm holding it together, or I'm not going to open my heart. Now, I'm saying this out loud. That is often not in the conscious awareness, but that's running underneath.
It's right. Our programming as
Yes, this right. The second way of human energy showing up in us is in our emotions. Only their frequency, So to learn to listen to my emotions, we don't have to get lost in them. But if I cannot acknowledge them, or if I avoid my anger, I cannot free myself of my anger. I slave to it instead of me mastering my anger. Or, like a broken heart. I never want to feel like that away. So again,
repress it, and then what we resist persists, right?
Right, exactly.
So we put all these distinctions together in a ritual practice that people learn, and there are specific roles. There's givers and receivers, and man, gender, it reverses itself. And so what happens in this practice is the altered state of what happens in the sexual. When sexual energy is alive, and again, the chemicals and the emotions, with these distinctions and intention, we get more unmasked. And it's in that unmasking. I know when I was first introduced to this practice as a self-love practice when I was 13, I was able to really see what my story was around going on to college on athletic scholarship. It was a story. Mm-hmm. It was simply a story. Whatever happens in the past happened, and oftentimes we live from the past into the moment, into the future. But in the moment is the future, and it's the past. So I can make a new future right here, right now. It's letting go of the past. It's like how things keep regurgitating and live and as a belief, kind of a Newtonian, the only thing real is what's happened, because that really happened, and then we live that into the future, so things are shifting. I feel like there's a really great opportunity in the world and consciousness around this age-old practice and this age-old energy that was, again, around before we had language.
So what about if we do the practice now, if you could do the practice.
Yeah, we'll just do a few minutes. Yeah.
So people whoever's listening can just drop into their own energy.
Yes, exactly. Listening or watching, because this is also going to be a video. And of course, if you're driving or whatever, then you can
listen later.
And listen later. Yes, exactly.
Pull over. You don't want to get sued for it. I was like, close my eyes. And, Okay, great.
Yes.
So seated up comfortably, as erect as you're comfortable being, feeling the stack of your spinal column on top of your sit bones. Put a hand on your belly and bring your awareness to your breathing. Your eyes can be open, closed, or soft focus. Following with your awareness, your breath coming into your nose, down your trachea, into your lungs, extending your diaphragm and your belly like a big balloon into your hand on your inhalation. Really expand, extend, exaggerate that expansion. Follow with your awareness your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Continue to breathe in this manner as consciously as you can. Feeling the rise of your belly on your inhalation, flattening of your belly on your exhalation through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Letting your thoughts come, letting your thoughts go. As thoughts come in, acknowledge them, let them be, don't engage, bring your awareness and focus back to your breath. Following your breath into your nose, down your trachea, lungs extending into your diaphragm and belly like a big balloon on your inhalation. Following with your awareness your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. You are your own witness, observer to any thoughts, conversations, interpretations, or meaning. For these few moments of just breathing and being, giving your busy mind a rest for a few moments. Rise of your belly on your inhalation. Flattening of your belly on your exhalation through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Stay with it.
And while you are breathing in and out, take a moment and notice how you're feeling right now. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice any sensations or the absence of sensations in your body. Now notice your emotional state. Just notice, nothing to be done. And notice your state of mind, your state of thought. Would you share how you feel, Valerie?
Yes, thank you. And this was just a wonderful mindfulness practice. Thank you for sharing. So what I noticed is, because I'm used to practicing this witness consciousness, but the first thought that occurred to me is that if people haven't tried mindfulness before, then we get overwhelmed by our body sensations or are lost in our thoughts. And so I was noticing that thought going through my head, like, oh, I can watch that thought, floating by like a train or like a cloud in the sky. And then as I observed that I could do that, I felt an openness in my heart, like an expansive feeling in my heart center of gratitude that I do have the ability to watch my thoughts rather than get pulled on the train. As a lot of mindfulness teachers say, you get on the train and run with it. And then I felt this openness in my heart as I was breathing. That was a gratitude that I have the ability to be in my body through all of the years of practice that I've done in that regard. And then I felt my sits bones grounded, and I was able to ask myself, well, what is the most important part of this experience for me right now, which is what I usually ask in my mindfulness practice, or what Freddy said is, we can then talk about how this applies to romantic relationships, to ask yourself, what do I want? What am I moving towards? So that's another good question to ask yourself, like when you're in an argument, right, which is where we can go with this. How do you, when you're really angry, use these practices to speak from the heart and listen to yourself and the other person in a deeper way, which, is the main ways that it applies to couples, of course, but, or the most dramatic way. I know there's many ways this applies. So I was feeling gratitude, and then I was feeling like the most important aspect of this for me, which gets communicated as a felt sense, not as words in my head. But I felt that as kind of like this full body fullness, like, oh, this is so important that people know how to do this. That's the main message that my body wanted to communicate. If I was in an argument, then the main message would be, hey, how can we resolve this together? What's the win-win? And that's what I would speak from my heart. And in this practice, what came to me is like, wow, this is so important. If people knew how to be mindful, not believe their thoughts automatically, not have to be stuck in our automatic defense behaviors, then that's how we create real intimacy. So that's the message that my body gave, of course.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's the thing that's wonderful about this is the mind is powerful and it doesn't stop. We can learn, as you said, to just watch it down the river without the total felt sense. And the parasympathetic breathing, which requires the mind to consciously do that, gives us an anchor. Yeah. Because often, like, well, what else is there if I don't have all this thinking going on? Well, yes. It's going to keep going on because the mind, that's how it justifies its existence, having something to fix, analyze, to make better.
Yes.
Yet we don't have to buy into every thought coming down the river. So we focus now on the breath. And that gives us an anchor. Where did those come from? That's interesting.
I don't know.
I know, right? Yeah, those who are listening, sorry, there's like a bunch of balloons that came up.
Good. I like
But
it.
I think that's the universe was accenting what you said.
Good.
That
Yes, we
you can
keep
focus on
building
what
on
you
that.
want to create. Yes.
Yeah, we keep building on that to, again, ultimately, this is about, sourcing your own life, sourcing your experience in your life, not being subjected to your life. Things happen to us, as we said earlier in our life, and that's done. Yet we keep reliving, or we're stuck in that place. And yet the good news is that we have a possibility of visualizing and imagining something new.
So what about, Valerie, if we come back to sexual energy, now that we have looked at, there are different forms of energy manifestations within us, that by becoming more aware of it, I become more attuned to my body, to my emotions, to my thoughts, also to my higher consciousness, the spiritual self. And contemplation is required, because otherwise I don't slow down and listen. And so then how can we use the sexual life force energy that is running through us in a serpentine way up the spine on the inhale and down the spine on the exhale? Every moment, every day, every breath, without our doing. And that energy that is most of the time in a subtle state, and then at times in aroused stages. So we can, move the breath and move our emotional anger, or embellish our bliss experience through the breath, through bringing our awareness to it. We then also can guide that aroused energy that is so potent, both in terms of pleasure, to heighten the pleasure experience, and not only locally in our sexual center, however, throughout the whole being, the physical being, the emotional being, the visceral being. And how can I then further channel the energy to embellish my love, embellish my heart, embellish my focus, embellish my imagination, and embellish my creations and the manifestation of creations in the outer world? So it's in so many ways we can draw on that energy once we bring awareness to it. And that is then, expands who I am as a human being, in the quality of my life, in joy and bliss, and moving through, even when I'm sick, how I can move this energy in a subtle way to speed up the healing process. And then how we can connect in energetic connection on all these levels, the physical, visceral level, the heart level, heart to heart, the consciousness level.
Aw, you look just so adorable. Tell me that you are connected on all those levels. Yes.
Right,
and then the sexual level, where our sexual centers can, we spoke about the infinity loop, can really dance together energetically. And then, of course, the whole circulation through Freddy to me, through me, and then, we are in that flow. Mm-hmm. All of that wants to be practiced.
What's wonderful is once we start getting into this, we let go of the ego, and we realize that, what the magic of the universe is, and the wonder of sexual energy is all of us. That's what we are. We're miracles.
Yeah, it's what creates life on the planet.
Miracles incarnate, and that's it, so.
Yeah, just let's look at, orgasmic energy, the feeling, and how it enlivens us. We didn't generate initially orgasm; it's built into us.
So I think
going back to the miracle. We are so miraculous, and the breath supporting us at all times, without our doing, is a miracle in itself.
Absolutely.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah, and science is starting to support a lot of what seems to be impossible. You know, when you say peace on earth, and it's just a thought away, and most folks will say that's impossible. And these are the kinds of practices, if most people practice them as it gets to a critical mass where everyone is like on this page, that's what we do with our technology, is we feed the planet. We get water running everywhere, sanitation everywhere. Whatever is available anywhere is available everywhere. And then we're living in a utopia world. We're at another level. And that's the quantum level that I think we're moving towards. All of this is in service of that.
Yeah. And I feel we are doing the groundwork. If we don't lay that foundation for ourselves individually and together, we don't have that foundation to come from to tackle, I mean, we can do it mechanically, but the way we feel about something, the mood we bring, if I come, your expertise around the heart and the love, that is so essential, that guides everything. And that comes first so that we can use our capacities and inventions and accomplishments for the highest good.
Yes, absolutely. And you've just said a really wonderful vision of the potential of these practices, that if we on an individual level can learn to cultivate our own energy and get past our programming, then we can focus on what we are creating in the world from a peaceful place. And if everybody was doing that at a critical mass, then obviously we can transform the horrible violence that goes on in the world. However, I want to bring it back down to the level of romantic relationships, since that's probably what most people that are listening to this are wanting to bring it to. And I know that since these concepts are really new for people, it'd be helpful to give some examples. So I think there's two really great examples that you've already brought. Number one, how do you use this if you're in conflict with your partner? Like, what does that actually look like to shift out of being angry to listening? And then separately than that, Elsbeth just did a great job of talking about sexual energy as creative life force within us. How can we inside of ourselves? Because we're not necessarily in touch with our sexual energy when we're arguing. But it's the same practice, of course, when we're not arguing, and so this would apply to singles as well. What does it actually look like to cultivate sexual energy and use that for our creativity? Because when we're fighting, we're not necessarily, although makeup sex sometimes can be hot, but when we're fighting, we're not necessarily focused on that. So let's start with what we originally brought, right? Which is like, okay, what do you do when you're angry to get back into a place of love and intimacy?
Yeah, if you're both doing this work and you both are, enrolled in, working through stuff, not staying stuck or on something, then you can do these what we call Tantric quickies. A quickie could be where you just, you feel like, you're both in that place and you both want to get off of it. So, one comes to the other and the other's willing and puts a hand on the heart center.
Oh, yeah. So one can do this with the other.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, so one approaches the other, and the other is like a little resistant, but realizes, I am committed to getting past this bullshit, whatever, to make a request or listen to a request or whatever. And
maybe
so
you make an agreement, so it's,
yes, exactly.
Not jarring, right? Yeah.
That's really great. It only works if we have made agreements around that before. Right. Otherwise, what?
Yeah, what are you doing? Right, exactly.
Right. So once we do this and both agree, the other hand comes to the heart here.
Oh, you want to do
We can do that. That's one thing we can do. And so here, and then we gaze into each other's left eye. There may be some resistance initially, like if you're in a heated thing. And then you breathe in together, breathe out together. Another breath in together. Gaze into each other's left eye, breathe out together. And then the next inhalation, visualize your attention on the location, sensation, the breath coming into your heart. And on the exhalation, you're sending love heart energy into the other's heart. gazing in the left eye. And you stay with that as you begin to let go of the anger energy, and you're reminded of what you've forgotten, what you've strayed away from, which is this connectiveness, this oneness.
And connecting from heart to heart really has us drop back into that love connection. We drop literally out of the head, because our anger is fueled by justification, and that lives in the head. When I drop into my heart, now, yes, as you said earlier, that takes willingness.
It's energetic yoga. So you're again, just being led to the place.
Well, exactly. And I think the key is witness consciousness. It's not that and it's semantics, right? It's not that we forget about the anger, but we are a witness to those ruminating thoughts in our mind. We recognize that's just thoughts, and we drop into our heart.
And we transmute the energy, and then we can make a request, or like you said, make a plan, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and the heart is so forgiving, and so, love energy is, we don't have to explain, we don't have to avoid, we don't have to run away. It's just like, and if it's really a big thing and one feels broken down, and so it could also just be holding, one is holding the other, and then just breathing together. Because, because sometimes it may be really intense, and one is not ready perhaps to reach out again.
And that's fine too. Just let the other know, I'm not ready yet.
Or just, and then knowing Freddy is here for me in this moment, that really breaks the pattern, that breaks my, calcification.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And if you're with a partner who is willing to do this work with you, that's just so wonderful.
What I say, Valerie, is the opportunity in relationship is to see something about yourself that you otherwise couldn't see on your own. So use the relationship as a transformational opportunity. Then you both keep growing collectively and individually, so that when the end comes, it's not like how you could have lived, it's how you did live. And what a great life it's been.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. That's a great soundbite. And I think that what Elsbeth said earlier is that even if your partner isn't willing, that's something you can do within yourself, right? That you're having that mindfulness, so that you're saying, I am angry. I'm going to give myself compassion for my anger, not believe the story, right? And then focus on, what is it that I need? How am I feeling, and what am I needing, and how can I communicate that from the heart, right? So do you want to speak more about that?
Yeah, so this is great. So let's say, because there are moments also between Freddy and me, and I'm using that Freddy may be very angry, and I didn't get so triggered, but I could go there. And that is that moment of that pause again with the witness, and I breathe. I use the breath. It's my saving grace.
Oh, yes.
Otherwise, I just shoot back.
Yes.
And then find my inner peace and breathe. And then, what I coach myself at that moment, say, oh, Freddy is doing Freddy. Now, this is a negative assessment. I do Elsbeth. I have times Elsbeth is doing Elsbeth. We cannot help ourselves at those moments, and to have room for that as well.
Yes.
And what I can do, being on the other side, instead of just becoming reactive, I can ground myself, breathe, and then just, okay, I'm here, or I'm just quiet.
Yeah, that's really good, is when the other's really so charged up, is to just be still and present and let them get it out. Move the energy, and then maybe later come back, and then you can come with the hug or with the circulating, and then speak, and make a plan.
Sometimes also when we are so in anger, we want to get it resolved right now. And what do you think? No, really tell me,
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yes, and you don't see that. You need to work on yourself and, all of that. And not to react to this and just say then, okay, darling, let's talk about it a little later. I'd appreciate just having a little pause. I do not run out in the past, perhaps I may have not running out exactly, but I, get a little distance. So now I stay and just, okay, let's look at it later. And if I can stay like that, that then also has an effect, wouldn't you say, on you?
Oh, absolutely. I want to add this, though. These practices are much more available, and this way of being is much more accessible when you do sexual meditation, because in the power of sexual meditation, there is an unmasking that is palpable throughout your life, not just in the bedroom when you're doing these practices, but that kind of intimate listening vibrationally and frequency-wise becomes much more accessible and available in the moments of your just regular life going. And so this is not just conceptual or something that's just linguistic or just analytical. It becomes a physical listening, if you know what I'm saying. So you got to try. Anybody get it, just give it a shot.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you're saying that, because it's not, sure, we can understand the concepts, but when we're actually in the heat of the moment, it's not concepts that solve us, that solve it, that save us, right? It's because the concepts are in our mind are just like, I'm right and the other person's wrong. Those are the concepts that we're conscious of. So what you're saying is, in those moments, it's about using the breath, slowing down, developing that witness to say, I'm observing my thoughts. Is that what I want to be moving towards? Is pushing the other person away? No. So I can either move into my heart and focus on compassion for what I feel in need and what the other person feels and needs and work through it. Or I might want to take a pause. And what Elsbeth so beautifully demonstrated is because I think a lot of people think that when you pause, you're repressing. It's not about repressing. It's about still being open through the breath, through mindfulness, through body awareness, about what is it that I'm feeling and needing? What is it that I'm wanting to move towards? And sometimes we need space to do that before we come back together, which is what you're saying. And then Freddy, and this is my next question, to move these two things together, because I think a lot of people don't understand, what does it mean to have a sexual meditation practice? That if you're doing that regularly, then you'll be able to be more mindful when you're emotionally triggered. But I don't know that people really know the connection between those two. So,
I teach a men's workshop, and in the men's work, I got one coming up this weekend in a couple of days, full workshop. And so in that workshop, one of the big takeaway practices is a self-love practice that they do at home in the privacy of their space between the first and the second day. So a self-love practice for a man, and all the variations of Tantra there are, one of the primary edicts is for the man to learn to separate ejaculation from orgasm. And that's kind of what a lot of guys are interested in Tantra about. Oh, be a better lover, last longer. There's some kind of magical something that can become even more expansive than it already is. And all of this will inform your mutual lovemaking, but this is a self-love practice. So the self-love practice for the man looks like there's mechanics of separating ejaculation from orgasm, a muscle awareness, breath awareness, energetic awareness, working from levels of 1 to 10, 10 being the ejaculatory moment, stopping in between before, like, say, it's 7, 7.5, 7.75, where they stop, do a Kegel or, a PC squeeze or a Mula Bandha, and they hold their breath. They bring their awareness to their breath as they're doing the squeeze, bringing this energy up on an inhalation with the breath to the heart, still holding the squeeze. On the exhalation, visualize sending the breath down into the floor, into the earth. At the bottom of the breath, release the squeeze. And they repeat that practice. And along with that practice, there is an intention setting, which is all part. They come in with an intention, and there's a lot of active processes that go through the day that keep honing this listening for this intention. So in those moments of a higher moment, this is the sexual meditation, all part of it. They are bringing their awareness to their intention. So there's an openness, chemically and emotionally, and they're bringing their awareness to this intention. They're letting the breath go, bringing their awareness to this intention. In that still moment, bringing their awareness to this intention.
Yeah, and
then
can you define what an intention is? Because I think most people are used to like having intention being, I'm going to, make love to this beautiful person. But you're saying intention is probably more a way of being, or something that you want
is
to.
what they want to create in their life that seems to elude them. They're here at the workshop paying their money, spending their time because they haven't created it. So how do they find space to be able to do that? So it might be, I want to not argue with my wife. I want to create a wife. I want to create work that's fulfilling or a place that's inspiring. It could be any one of a number of things.
Or just feeling loved. My intention is to feel loved.
Yeah, so it's right, something that you want to create.
Yes.
And so,
sorry to interrupt.
No, just perfect, Valerie. It's just all flowing beautifully. So that's the intention, and they might come in with an intention, and through the process of discovery through the day, they might create a new intention, or they might have a second intention on top of that other intention. So that's what they're doing. Again, in this intimate vulnerability, this altered state of what happens in the sexual, we get more emotionally, chemically receptive to what we don't see running in the background. So that's often what happens for people when they go through these practices. There's an opening, there's a seeing, there's an aha moment, there's a frequency listening beyond the story or the narrative. That's an energy that they're familiar with, that now they can listen for, that might be the thing that leads them into that fight or flight thing that is not allowing them to bring in what they most deeply desire. So it's this kind of observing as a curious witness of this clay that we are, that we're beginning to get some distance from in the working with the sexual altered state and intention and all these other things we're talking about in this interview today. And there's a lot to it. It sounds like, oh my God, but this is what we've been doing for 22 years. People of all levels. Some people are meditators. Some people have never done any of this stuff.
Exactly. And I know that the benefit of that for everybody, not just men, of being able to, I want to say what you're talking about through the practices that you're teaching is about developing awareness of what we're creating and what we're wanting to create, even when we feel really, really high sensation in our body. And sex is one of those times in which we feel really, really high sensation in our body. And all we want to do is move towards that end goal. And instead, what you're saying is allowing yourself to channel that energy towards what you want to create in your life. And that when you're able to do that, then you can do that with your partner during sex, but you could also do that in an argument. Stay really aware of what it is that I'm feeling in my body. And I don't just have to, like shame is a hot potato, you take it, right? That I can focus on who do I want to be? What do I want to create? No matter how high the sensation gets. Right. And that's the purpose of what, you share.
And I'm not saying with sexual energy to not do the lusting thing or the quickies in the morning or any of the other things that we do with sex. I'm saying in addition to procreating that we've been doing forever with the development of contraceptives, recreating, and now what we're talking about is how can we co-create with this creative life force energy?
Yes. And it's a beautiful way of getting into the body, since sex is the way that we're normally used to being in our bodies, but then we think that we're just supposed to be feeling pleasure and then releasing it, and there's nothing wrong with that, as you're saying, as opposed to feeling sensation and cultivating it. And I know, as you also teach, when we activate sexual energy, when we get turned on, a lot of times we have shame and guilt that we've been indoctrinated with that comes up. And then it's about working through that so that we can hold more unconditional self-love in our hearts for all of us and, love for the other person. And so I'm sure that's part of it too.
Yeah. We could teach these practices to nuns and priests if they were vowed to celibacy. It's about being what this energy creates as a feeling and a being, seeing ourselves in each other, an open heart, loving, peaceful, intimately connected.
Yes.
That's where this energy leads us to. And,
Yeah. Ultimately, simply put, coming back into our original flow.
Yes.
When babies come into this world, usually they are very unencumbered. Even the spine is not constricted at all. Everything flows. They don't get attached to emotions. They may cry one moment and then after 5 minutes they smile. They don't hold anything against you because you didn't come right away and give them the bottle or the breast or so. Of course, the brain is not as developed yet, also with past, present, and future, so that it's not like they are just in the moment more. But there's something to be gleaned from, which... Back to what you said earlier, that moment of orgasmic height is so wonderful because for a moment we don't think, we don't assess, we don't judge. It's like just being in the flow. Now, a minute later, we may all, darling, this time was particularly good, or it was not as good as last time.
Back in the
Moments. So what about elongating these moments of being in the present, in my flow, and then in flow in relationship, and the sexual energy, approaching it in a conscious way, in an aware way? We can have that energy support us because it's that primal energy that loves to flow, that's its nature. So let me use it and fill me up and invigorate me and enliven me, and every sense, every emotion, every my mental capacity and my connection to the universe, and then, pulling it down again.
Yes.
And then in that magic of the cosmic flow that is blissful and, eternal.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that Freddy mentioned the practices for men. I know that there's practices in doing so for all genders. And I think probably what most people are wondering, though, is that when we do bring up all of our life force energy and our sexual energy, a lot of us do have wounding in that area. We have limiting beliefs like shame or guilt from our programming. We've been hurt in the past by people misusing their sexual energy. And so how do you help people clear that as it comes up? Because that's usually what prevents people from activating their sexual energy.
Yes. And that is so, underneath. And it's not only from our individual history, it's a collective history. It has been around millennia. And particularly feminine sexual energy has been vilified for a long time. When a
abused and suppressed.
Yeah, and when a woman is
and oppressed,
fully sexually expressed, she may be called a whore or a slut. We never would say that about a man. No, he is like a harem.
It's assumed we're whores. It's assumed that we are just
you are
out of control.
No,
it is because we are. I mean, we've been lauded for playboys and harems, and
playboys.
So and so for guys, it's about bringing consciousness. For women, it's about expressing and opening up,
awakening,
right? Exactly,
sexual energy,
reawakening.
In general, yes.
In general, yes.
That fear, embarrassment, guilt, shame, these are really collective, both men and women. It's there.
Yeah, in different ways. Yep.
Right. And all of these frequencies of emotions are actually constricting. They are the opposite of flow. And also when we look at that sexual energy is life force energy, it actually constricts our life force energy, not just our pleasurable sexual expression in life. It's the whole, it plays out in every facet of our life. So, and that is something to be approached very much in the rhythm, in the pace of the individual. Now, while we work with groups, as we already mentioned earlier, but within that, each person has their own pace. For example, and I never know when it shows up. I know that given the structure and design of the workshop, at some moment in the workshop, a light goes on, or some woman or a man, if it's a co-ed workshop, is confronted with something. I never know when it's going to happen, but it happens at some point, and we want to deeply honor that. There's nothing to be rushed. There may be a process where some participants really get confronted with, feel very uncomfortable even talking about any sensual experience. And I'm not talking in the workshop what happened, Mike, from the past, Mm-hmm. I mean, there was an 81-year-old woman in my past women's workshop last weekend. And when they came back, reporting, sharing from their self-love practice, where I asked them to spend an hour with themselves, by themselves. It's a solo practice, and really being like the lover to the beloved in one, where I listen to myself as the lover that I so desire to come to me. I am the lover who listens to the beloved. So I'm the giver and the receiver at the same time. And so when she came back the next day, she could barely talk about the experience. She had a great experience, but she waited until last, after every woman had reported. And then I really had to support her, and how was it? And how did you feel? And what did you do? And everything was like pulling off a layer. And she left the workshop wow, now I can invite the men of my choice into my life.
Right.
I can ask for it. I can speak. And, so in other women the day before, they had a breakdown, or recalling something from the subconscious that gets revealed. And we do some processes to assist participants in tapping into the subconscious. So, and then once we reveal that, we come to choice. Do I want to perpetuate that, what I had believed, or that what I had felt? Or I could leave that in the past and bring in a new self.
Yes, thank you for sharing that example. That's such a beautiful example of somebody who was really, for no fault of their own, more shut down because of their past experiences. And that you don't rush people, right? You teach people practices to connect, to get out of their heads, witness your thoughts, but be more centered in your heart and in your body, and learn to use your sexual energy. And once you learn to use it, it brings up a lot of people's wounding. And so, as you're saying, you create a really safe space in your workshops and your one-on-one work to not rush people, to actually deal with what is coming up and how do you heal the wounds. And then what do you want to create instead, right? Do you want to perpetuate the same programming? Or who do you want to be instead? And what do you want to believe instead? And so then what are you wanting to create instead? And how do you do that? And so that's what the practices that you teach are all about.
Yeah.
And we have a gift for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So before we go there, that really, and it happens, transformation happens through experience. It doesn't happen through an intellectual understanding.
Right.
So while we introduce distinctions and practices, and how that, bring it all together, but the actual shift happens in experience.
Right.
And that is where a new experience then also can get created once we allowed ourselves to touch into something that we may have avoided or shied away, or we didn't even know that it was there.
Yes, exactly. Because it's in our unconscious mind. And so These practices help bring what needs to be healed and what wants to be created to the surface so that we can work through it. So tell us more about your free gift. Is this webinar, right?
I have second thoughts now. So, because given where the conversation went with sexual meditation, we can offer different kinds of gifts. One is called Ignite Your Relationship, with yourself and your relationship with the partner. If you have a partner in your life, it applies to both. And it's like a beginning workshop, introductory workshop, video workshop. There's another intro we have, where we actually lay the foundation for sexual meditation. So I just want to bring it to you and ask you, what would you recommend, or what would you like?
Well, I mean, hey, there's abundance, right? I think we have enough space in our show notes to give both free gifts if you would like.
Oh, both! You would? Oh my gosh! Talking about abundance, look at you. Okay.
Yes, of course. I mean, if you want to offer both free gifts, then yes. So
Wonderful.
I can put the links below this video or in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast. And this will be available on my website. Usually I put the first name of the guest as the link, but I haven't decided since I'm interviewing both of you. I think I will make it coachvaleriegreen.com/Elsbeth-Freddy. So I will write that in my notes just because, but I know that, do you want to spell your names just so that people know how to access it on my website? Just spell your first names.
Okay, yeah, so my name is spelled E-L-S like in Sam, B like in boy, E-T-H, dash.
Zental.
Oh, sorry, no, that's your last name. I think it's just more...
teacher name. Okay, I'll use Freddy, Freddy.
Yes, so it's E-L-S-B-T-H, right? Sorry, I... dash Freddy, Freddy. So it's coachvaleriegreen.com /.
Yeah, and that's DDY.
Yes, Freddy. Yeah, I just like to put the first names because they're easier to remember. And so if people have a hard time accessing the link for whatever reason to the free gift inside the podcast platforms, you can find the audio to the podcast on my website at coachvaleriegreen.com /Elsbeth-Freddy. And of course, that link will be in the show notes of the podcast if you're listening to it as in the podcast platforms. And I will put the link to both of their free gifts inside the show notes and inside the underneath the YouTube video. But just in case people have trouble accessing it, I will also send the link to where they can access it on my website. But so I know that sounds kind of complicated. Sorry about that. So the first free gift is Ignite Your Relationship webinar. So the link to that I will post. And then the second one is an intro to the sexual energy meditation. And what is that one called?
That is called Introduction to Sexual Meditation.
Perfect. That's really easy. And that's a guided practice in that regard.
Yeah. Either one will guide you as the listener further in practices. Today in this conversation, we opened these possibilities. And now going to the videos, you can learn the practices that will guide you in connecting with your energy.
Yes.
And give you some further distinctions for listening to yourself. So it's really, we want to leave you today with something that you can bring into your life now.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you've done a great job of giving very small practices to get our feet wet, with the parasympathetic breathing. And I think, as you said, that these are really taught through experiences, not through understanding. And so I'm glad that you're giving these robust free gifts, which are, the webinar and the intro, that people can really listen and start to observe the potential of these practices for themselves. And then, of course, if they want to get in touch with you afterwards, your webpage is tantranova.com, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And gosh, I mean, I love the info that you shared because I think that it's, at this time in the world, I mean, this podcast will be up forever. And at this time in the world, there are various wars going on that people are very up in arms and sad and angry about, justifiably. And so I think that talking about the macrocosm, if we want peace on earth, then we need to cultivate peace within ourselves. But we can't do that by understanding. We have to get into our body and clear away all of the, negative programming in the clay so that we can really move towards what we want and be grounded and live from our heart. And so that's what both of you teach. And I'm so grateful for you bringing that. Any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I just want to say it is a daily practice for me just as much as for anyone else. Going to the gym once is not going to make me a great athlete.
Yes.
So it is the ongoing practice, like the waxing on and the waxing off, as a daily practice. And so the beauty of it is then over time, the nervous system gets altered.
Right.
And there is a basis that, I can feel now when I go home to my family in Germany, I don't get triggered anymore. That doesn't mean it don't come up, but I go, okay. Let me breathe. I don't have to react, but not a huge effort.
Right.
So now it's like, in that sense, the nervous system gets used to the new state of being that I have been cultivating to become. So I just want to share this, that it's an ongoing practice, and I'm so delighted that each of you is listening are going to be part of the practice now.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because I agree. It's about cultivating this new relationship with ourselves, which takes time. So, yes. So thank you. I just feel so filled up by this conversation, and I'm excited to share all of these practices and this wisdom with the world. So I thank you so much.
Valerie. Thank you so much.
And it's been such a pleasure. And until next time.